Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 2025 DD Council Training and Technical Assistance Institute. Our theme this year is Shaping the Future. My name is Cheryl Matney, and I'm the director of the Information Training and Technical Assistance Center for DD Councils. For those of you who are new to the DD Council network, or even those of you who might need a refresher, the Information and Training and Technical Assistance Center, we typically call it ITAC, provides training and technical assistance to councils throughout the year. We have a 5-year contract that is awarded to NACDD to administer, and your funding source also funds our work, and we serve as their service contractors to you all. So each year, our ITAC staff, with guidance from a planning committee and in partnership with the administration federal staff, develop this institute for members of the DD Council network. So that makes up council directors, council staff people, council members, grantees of councils, and we're really happy you've joined us this year. I'd like to introduce you formally to Amy DeVille, who is our Training and Technical Assistance Administrator. And she's done another wonderful job facilitating all of the planning meetings, getting speakers, and making sure we just have a great Institute experience. So thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. We're so glad that you've joined us today. I just want to give you a little bit of information to help you better participate. Links to recordings and key resources will be posted to our website, itachelp.org. And when they are ready, we'll announce their availability on our listserv and in our TA news brief. We ask that you please keep yourself on mute during the presentation to help with background noise. Closed captioning is available. On the bottom of your screen, you should see a square with the letter CC and show captions. Click on the up arrow and you can select how you'd like to view captions. You can select subtitles, and those will show at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can select full transcript, and that will show on the right-hand side of your Zoom screen. And we also have a link in the chat for stream text, which is another way that you can view the captions. We also invite your comments and questions. Look at the Q&A box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, you can type it in there or in the chat. We'll either pose it to our speakers at that time, or we'll hold it until the end when we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. We will conduct a quick poll at the end, and we appreciate your participation and your feedback. So thank you in advance for participating in that. And now let's start the session. As you know, the 2025 DD Council Training and Technical Assistance Institute was planned by a group of your peers, and I would like to introduce you to Matt Caslin. Matt Caslin is currently the Vice Chair for the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities. He is a passionate self-advocate who experiences autism spectrum disorder and an intellectual disability. He's been involved in advocacy efforts for over 13 years. Matt?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or wherever you guys are from. My name is Matt Kazan. I am like as Amy said, I am the Vice Chair for Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities, called NCDD. And I would like to tell attendees that they have just joined the session titled Adaptive Innovative Practices for Recruiting Prospective members, and gives a brief description of the session. So, during this session, we will explore strategies to enhance information gathering research, explore the different ways councils evaluate prospective members that they can value in onboarding for new council members. I would like to introduce the first speaker, the speakers. Ebony Haven serves as the executive director for the Louisiana Council on Developmental Disabilities and has been on the council in various roles since 2018. Ebony?
Thanks, Matt. I'm actually gonna jump in here and introduce the rest of the speakers, and then I actually
Oh,
have slides that I'm gonna do real quick.
oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. That's my bad.
You're good.
Okay, and then so I'll keep going through them, and then we'll all go through, and then we'll do your slides, and then we'll go into presentations.
Okay.
Correct? Okay. Then we'll do Stephanie Lancaster. She is currently serves on the social services administrator of the Delaware Council on Developmental Disabilities Council. Stephanie has been with the council for 14 years. Then we have Lillian DeJean. She she is is currently a part-time consultant for iTech and currently serves as the Louisiana Youth Leadership Foundation coordinator. And well, myself, you guys got my background already, so I won't go through that. Uh, Cordero Booker was a member of the Alabama Council of Developmental Disabilities from 2013 until 2023. Lisa Newburn serves as chair of the Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities. Back to you, Amy.
Thanks, Matt. Frank, would you like to put up the slides? There we go. Next slide. So just to start off, I'll give you a little bit of background information about sort of how we came to this session. You can go to the next slide. When we were starting to design this session with the committee, with the planning committee, we wanted to make sure that we provide information that is most helpful to the most of you. So we started talking about what is it that councils could really benefit from. And of course, we always start with evidence-based practices. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about that. But in addition, we wanted to really see kind of what the landscape was in terms of council member applications and those processes. So we put out a call to the executive directors and said, send in your council member applications and let us know, did you develop it? Are you using your state governor board application, or what your process is? And we got a pretty good response rate. We got about 23 and 24 applications or links that were sent in that we were able to review to get an idea of what people are using when it comes to council member applications. And we saw that about half, a little over half of the ones that we received were developed by the council itself. So a number of councils are able to use a council member application, at least at the very beginning of the process, that they develop, which is great. And then we saw a little under half were using a governor's board application, and got a lot of feedback from people who really don't like that process, which is understandable because I looked at a lot of those applications too, and they're really not doing a very great job of identifying people who are appropriate fits for council membership categories. So in looking at all of these different things, that's sort of how we ended up with the speakers and the presentations that we'll have today. I'm going to go through evidence-based practices. And Ebony Haven from the Louisiana Council is here to talk about their process. And you'll find once she starts talking that they have a lot of these evidence-based practices kind of built into their process, which is great, particularly when you look at that interview portion and then kind of what follows behind it. And then for all of you who are struggling with your governor's applications and sometimes not getting the information that you need out of that process, we have Stephanie Lancaster with the Delaware DD Council, and they have done a lot of work, which she will talk about, to kind of work out that process with their board's office and come up with something that works a little better for them. And so she'll kind of lead you through all of that and give you some great information. So let's talk evidence-based practices. One of the most important things is having a strategic membership plan. Really having a system, some sort of an organizational matrix where you are able to really look at the council members that you have and see some gap areas, whether those gaps are in membership category. So you have a term expiration for a self-advocate and you need to fill with another self-advocate. Or if you're talking about skills and experiences that maybe don't have anything to do with membership category. So maybe you would really benefit from having somebody on the council who really has a strong communication or marketing background that could really help your council in some other areas. So a membership matrix is a very important first step. Having a formal recruitment process, of course, is also evidence-based. Advertising, vetting, interviewing, reference checking, all recommended. And when you interview, using a rubric or a candidate evaluation form to help with that interview process and really kind of look at the responses that you're getting and evaluating those. Using peer networks and public postings, which I think most councils are doing, really taking advantage of your council members' networks. They have great networks. They typically are very involved in other boards or other councils or committees or organizations that also are disability related. And so you're able to utilize and leverage those networks to kind of help get the word out. And then, of course, always conducting open calls for applications, because you definitely want to see new people come into the council world too. Member onboarding and engagement is extremely important. And we're going to talk about that at the very end of the session, where we have a panel of some former and current council members who are going to talk about their onboarding experiences and what they think is very important for them. But having a comprehensive onboarding is, of course, very helpful for new members. They need to know what they need to know to be able to be a good, fully participative council member right from the very beginning. And one way to kind of help with that is to assign a mentor. So somebody who's on your council who has been there for a while, a little more seasoned, who can kind of help guide the new council member, answer questions along the way. And it helps with engagement on both of their parts. And of course, the exchange of information is great too. Making sure that you share specific responsibilities, the time commitment, the expectations of a council member up front. It's really important that they have a good understanding of what it is that they're signing up for before they just jump in. Council work is sometimes difficult, sometimes emotional, always a big time commitment. And it's important that people understand that before they jump in. And then, of course, assessing member performance regularly. And we're really talking about self-assessments. So having council members self-assess and think about areas where they might need a little extra education, a little extra training, so that they can participate more fully and maybe be more aware of what's happening with the council. Next slide. So this slide is really about methods, and we're actually going to I actually talked about methods a lot in that last slide, but the only thing from here that I'm going to just bring forward is making sure that you use a committee process. So it might be a membership committee or a nominating committee. Councils tend to call it something different. But using a committee to kind of help make decisions about who will be recommended for appointment by the governor's office if you're in a state where that's allowed. And then also using the formal voting process to approve recommendations to just make sure that everything is done, keeping in line with your state open meetings laws, which would include an open public forum for the voting process. Next slide. So there were some things that I just wanted to kind of put out there, some food for thought when it comes to your applications for councils that are able to develop their own applications for council membership. And the first is think about what your questions are really asking and the information that you really want to get out of those responses. And make sure that the questions that you have on your application really directly relate to information that you're going to use in the decision about whether or not to recommend someone for appointment. So you want to ask questions that provide information related to key member criteria, of course. You want to make sure that the people that are applying, that you can easily tell if they fit in one of the membership categories that you have open. And the other thing is open-ended questions. There were a lot of open-ended questions in the applications that we reviewed. And open-ended questions are sometimes really great, but they're often best when you have an interview opportunity, where you give people an opportunity to really speak about whatever your open-ended question is. Sometimes in a written application, an open-ended question is just a little too broad. When you ask a question like, tell us about your family, or tell us about yourself, that really is so broad that you may not be getting the information that you are really looking for by asking that kind of question. So think about when you review your questions on your application, is it really getting responses that you were hoping for? And if not, could you tailor that question and maybe close it in a little bit so you get the responses that you were kind of looking for, the information you were trying to get out of that question? Or maybe it's a question best left for an interview time instead of for a written application time. We also want to make sure that you include information about the member role, what it is that members do, what the expectations are, and the time commitment needed. Not only is it an evidence-based practice, but also the applicant should also be reviewing whether or not this is a good fit for them. So is council membership right for them? It's not right for every person. And the more information that they have up front about what it is that the council does, what the council believes, the time commitment needed, all of those sort of expectations, the more informed decision a person can make about whether or not council membership is right for them. So including that information is always very important. So that wraps it up for me. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ebony, who's going to tell you about the Louisiana process. Ebony?
Thank you so much, Amy. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, well, depending on where you are in the country. Again, my name is Ebony Haven, and I'm the Executive Director for the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. And so Louisiana's council membership recruitment process has really evolved over time. In 2020, we had a very active council member who was involved in a lot of other boards, and she sat on a lot of other councils. So she had a lot of experience in recruiting new members, and she really saw that there was a need to improve the application process for the DD Council. So she helped the council to develop a lot of materials that you're going to see here today. And we're currently continuing to evolve that process and make it more efficient and effective for our membership process. So just a quick overview. This is the overview of the process that we have right now. I've broken it up into about 8 steps, and that will go through from monitoring term expirations all the way to making recommendations to the governor for council membership. So It might look long, but I just wanted to give each step a little bit of time just so I make sure that I explain things well to everyone that's present today. So next slide, please. So currently our members serve a 4-year term unless they're filling a seat due to resignation. Our administrative assistant and I keep track of term dates, and in January of every year, we determine which members' terms are going to be ending that year. So depending on when the majority of the terms end, we determine when we'll start and complete the recruitment process. So there is a provision in the DD Act, just in case the recruitment process starts after someone's term ends. There is a provision in the DD Act which allows council members to continue to serve on the council until a successor is appointed. So since our council meets quarterly in the months of January, April, July, and October, we have to also take those meetings into account so the council can vote. So for example, most of the members whose terms expire this year in 2025 have an end date of November 2025. Therefore, our recruitment process will have to be started and completed prior to the council's October meeting so that they can vote in October for the members who are going to be expiring in November 2025. So additionally, we've learned that with each governor comes a new process. And our current governor's office has been a little bit slower than the previous administration with making appointments. So we know that with this current administration, we have to get those nominations in early. Just to make sure that we have our appointments when we need them. So we can go to the next slide, please. So before we start advertising, we basically complete a status check on the membership, on the citizen membership, which basically means that we look at the current makeup of the citizen members and we compare that to the DD Act requirements. So the DD Act requires citizen members of the council to reflect the diversity of the state or territory with respect to race and ethnicity, and to be geographically representative of the state. Therefore, we use the data from the Census Bureau each year to determine the makeup of our council and what the demographics should look like. And so when I first started the council, we had a lot of white parents, moms to be more specific. So we've worked really hard to make sure that we bring the diversity and we look at that state makeup so that our council can reflect those demographics in respect to race and ethnicity, and making sure that they are geographically representative. A lot of our members, when I first started, were in the south of our state. We didn't have a lot of members in the north part or the northern part of our state. So we've done a lot of recruitment for the northern region in the central part of our state, just to get more members to be more representative of the state of Louisiana. Additionally, as we all know, 60% of our membership has to be citizen members. And of that 60%, 1/3 has to be individuals with lived experience. 1/3 has to be parents or guardians of children with DD, or immediate relatives, guardians of adults with IDD who can't advocate for themselves. And then 1/3 has to be a combination of those two. So we look at all of those things before we start advertising. And so the things that we include in our advertisements are if we're looking for a certain part of the state, the location of the state, and we use Constant Contact for our listserv and to get information out to our listserv. So that particular software data system, we can actually target the areas that we need. So if we need people from the central part of the state, we can target that area. If we need people in the northern part of the state, we can target that area using Constant Contact. We also include the roles that we're looking for. If we're looking for a person with lived experience or a parent or a family member, we include that in the advertisement. And then we always make sure that we include that preference will be given to the best applicants who help us to come into DD Act compliance. So our advertisements are sent to our council listserv. They're shared on all of our social media outlets, and they're shared with our state agency reps that sit on our council. We also share them with other disability organizations, including the ARC of Louisiana. Here in Louisiana, we have regional resource centers called Families Helping Families, who are basically our boots on the ground. They're the ones who have constant contact with our families. So we make sure to share the information with those centers. And then we also have our DD office with our state. They are able to share the information with provider agencies and support coordination agencies as well. So next slide, please. So there are several options whenever someone is interested in applying for the council. We have our application online, so they can either submit the application online, they can print it and fill out the application and then email it, or they can send it by mail if they want to. So once we get the applications, the administrative assistant and we collect those applications, and our administrative assistants, she compiles those in a spreadsheet with the demographic information and also like other pertinent information like leadership experience, if they are a graduate from Partners in Policymaking, or if they went through our youth leadership forum. They include if they included any of that information on their application, the administrative assistant just she includes that information in the spreadsheet. I also, as the executive director, review the applications, and if there was not a lot of information included in the application to verify eligibility, then I give them a call to ask clarifying questions. And then I just make sure that they are eligible based on the DD Act requirements. So for example, a lot of times we get parents who apply and they have adult children with developmental disabilities, but that adult child can advocate for themselves. So a lot of times I find myself having to encourage that parent to allow their child to apply for council membership instead. So next slide, please. So here in Louisiana, we do a membership committee. I know Amy just went over other options that councils can use, but here in Louisiana, we form a ad hoc membership committee. And so that's the next step, is to form that committee. So based off volunteers who want to serve on the committee, the council chair appoints those members. And we try to include all types of members that we have on our council currently. So we try to make sure there are individuals with lived experience, there are parents, and then there's representation from our state agency reps as well. So based on the number of committee members, they are divided into teams to conduct those interviews. And each team sets and conducts their own interviews, and we'll kind of get into that process in just a second. Committee members are also given materials that were developed by that council member that I kind of mentioned earlier. The best practices document that was developed, that was actually developed by a previous committee because there were some, I guess, discrepancies in the way teams were conducting interviews. And so we wanted to standardize that process. So I'm going to show you guys in just a second our best practices. But the teams are also given the applicant interview form, they're giving a rating form, and they're also given additional information that the staff and I collect. So we include advocacy participation, and here in Louisiana, we have an advocacy network. It's called LACAN. It's Louisiana Council's Advocacy Network. So if the applicant has participated in any of LACAN activities, including roundtables, if they've attended legislative visits, or if they've attended our Yellow Shirt Days, which are days at the Capitol where they may or may not be able to provide testimony during committee meetings. We include all of that information. And we also include any other pertinent information about leadership training, like if they are partners in policymaking graduate. So next slide, please. So during our applicant interviews, the applicants who are determined to be eligible are divided and assigned to the membership committee teams. And then the teams refer to the best practices, which I'll show in a second, to schedule those interviews. The teams conduct the interviews and they rate each applicant based on their interview answers. And I'll show you guys the rating form in just a second. But the rating form includes ratings that take into consideration if the applicant fully supports the values in the DD Act, if they're familiar with our council, and if they understand and support its purpose, if they have the potential to become a systems change advocate, and if they've demonstrated any leadership skills. So initially, when the form was first created by the council member that I mentioned earlier, she wanted them to use a 5-point scale, which included ratings like outstanding, very good, good, fair, and poor. But committees, after she created that particular rating form, found it very confusing to rate the applicants because they didn't know what would an outstanding answer consist of, or what would a very good answer consist of. So we have evolved that rating sheet, and therefore we changed it recently to a 3-point scale. So the ratings now are either yes, they did answer this question, or they somewhat answered this question, or they didn't answer this question at all. Or they may support some of the values in the DD Act, but they didn't know others. Or yes, they were very familiar with the council and understood its purpose, or no, they didn't know the council very well. So we'll kind of look at that rating form in just a second. So next slide, please. So these are some of the best practices that one of the committees came up with here in Louisiana. And I won't go over every one of them, but I just want to point out two. The preferred method, which I think is the third best practice, the preferred method that they came up with is a Zoom interview. And that's just to allow the participant time to express themselves, and also so that the questions can be displayed for the applicant and they're not just listening to interviewer ask them the questions. And the teams are able to utilize the council Zoom account if they don't have one. And then I wanted to point out, I want to say it's the fourth best practice. We were having issues with some committee members calling once, or some committee members calling twice, some committee members only emailing applicants to set up interviews. So we came up with this best practice so that things are just standardized, and that the committee member teams or the interview teams are consistently doing the same things. So committee members have to at least log 3 attempts for each applicant, and that includes email, phone, or whatever other form of communication that the applicant provided in their application. And so if we have 2 members on the team, that will mean each member needs to attempt to contact that particular applicant themselves. So it will be a total of 6 attempts if there are 2 members assigned to that team. And I hope that makes sense. And we just wanted to make sure that we had these best practices in place so that there was a standardized method with each interview team, so that everybody was just sort of on the same page. Next slide, please. So once the interviews are completed, we have our membership committee meeting. And so best practices also state that all applications should be shared with all the members. And the reason for that was because committee members wanted a chance to review the applications, even if they weren't the ones that were assigned to conduct that interview with that applicant. And that's just to make sure, just in case they have questions about a particular applicant, when they're in the committee meeting, they are able to ask those questions of the interview team that actually conducted that interview. So the assigned teams submit their scores to the executive director, me, and those scores are averaged and put into a table so that they can be presented during the committee meeting. So during the meeting, the information from the DD Act compliance is given to the members and is presented to in the public meeting. And then members are able to discuss the applicants and the details of their interviews during the meeting as well. And so usually that part of the meeting, we have to go into executive session for this part. By the end of the meeting, the committee is going to make a recommendation for the full council to consider. So they make a recommendation on all the members that they want to recommend for council membership. And so that recommendation is taken to the full council. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to include like our interview questions. We didn't want to make it too long. It's only 2 pages of interview questions. And as you can see, some of the questions have prompts for the interviewers to ask follow-up questions if they need to. For example, if you look at the first question, it states, what do you know about the council and why do you want to join? So if the applicant answers the question and the interviewers see that their answer was sort of short or vague, they're prompted to ask follow-up questions just in case they need more information in order to make sure that they can rate that individual as a yes, somewhat, or a no. So next slide, please. And so this is our scoring rubric. It's a 1-page rubric that the interviewers use. So after the interview is complete, based off the answers that they have written down for the applicant, they are able to use this form to rate the applicant. And again, we went from a 5-point scale to a 3-point scale. So that it would be just a little bit easier for someone to say, okay, yes, this person answered these questions well, or they somewhat answered the question, but they didn't include all of the information, or if they didn't answer the question at all, it would be a no, just to make things a little bit easier. Next slide, please. So after the committee meets, the council meeting is next. The applicants that are recommended for council membership are asked to provide a short bio sketch or a resume. And that bio sketch or resume will be given to all the council members just so they'll have more information if they didn't sit on the membership committee. And so in the bio sketch, they can include information about why they want to become a council member and why they think they will be a good fit. And some of the applicants go all out. They include all sorts of great information, and they even include pictures of themselves. So this is just to help the council members get a picture of the applicant, especially if they weren't on the membership committee. So during the council meeting, the committee chair reports to the council on the membership committee, and they present the recommendations to the full council. The council is then allowed to ask questions if they need to, and then the full council votes for the applicants to recommend to the governor for appointment. And based on the final recommendations, those applicants are sent letters to notify them that the council has chosen them. If they weren't chosen, a letter is sent to them to let them know that we had a lot of applicants. We thank them for their application. But at this time, they won't be sent to the governor for recommendation. And they're encouraged to apply again if they're still interested when we are recruiting later. So next slide. And so after the council votes, those recommendations are sent to the governor's office. And depending on the administration at the time, the applicant may be asked to provide more information. I think the current administration that we have right now, they have a separate application that they are requiring our recommendations to complete. So after that additional information is received to the governor's office, they complete a background check, and then the governor makes his decision on which applicants he would like to offer appointments to. So once they make their determination, the executive director and the applicant is notified that they have been chosen by the governor for appointment to the council. And once those appointments are completed, an orientation is scheduled and completed for those members, and they begin their 4-year journey on our council. So next slide, I think that's it. And that's our process.
Thank you so much, Ebony, for sharing. I don't know if you saw in the chat, but people were talking about how your slides were making them hungry. Love your
No, I didn't see.
Thank you for the information, for the presentation. We're going to move now to Stephanie Lancaster, who's going to talk about what they've done in Delaware. Stephanie?
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Ebony, for your presentation. Some of that information was very well thought out, and some of it I wish we could incorporate here in Delaware. But we in Delaware, we utilize our governor's boards and commissions application through our governor's office. All of the applicants that are interested in applying for our council membership typically are invited from our Partners in Policymaking program. That's where we get many of our applicants who are interested. We invite them to attend many of our meetings prior to applying to be on the council. But in the process of being here for so many years with the council, for 14 years, we've come to realize that there's a lot of challenges utilizing the state's boards and commissions application, as the questions that are asked on the application are not as specific as we need them to be to fit the requirements within the DD Act. As Ebony stated, there are specific requirements for the positions on the council, and the application itself lacks those specific questions. You'll see in a minute what our current application looks like, a screenshot of it, but it doesn't specifically call out the representation of, person with a developmental disability, the parent of a guardian, or guardian of a person with a developmental disability, the immediate relative of a person who with a developmental disability who cannot advocate for themselves. We realized people were being appointed into positions where they didn't meet the federal requirements. Next slide, please. Currently, this is the only questions on our application that reflect anything having to do with a disability. And as you can see, it simply states, are you a person or a relative of a person with a disability, yes or no, and please indicate. And if you are a parent of a person with a disability, is the person over the age of 18. Those two questions obviously are not going to get you the answers you need. If you answer, we would get people answering the question, are you a person with a disability? Yes. If yes, indicate what? Someone might answer, yes, I have bipolar disorder. Then they would be appointed to the council because they had a disability. Well, as we know, bipolar disorder is not necessarily a developmental disability, so that doesn't fit the criteria that we would need to fulfill that role on the council. So upon learning some of, and that's just one example, but there were several different occasions where people were being appointed and they didn't fit the criteria. One that Ebony mentioned of parents being appointed and they did have children over the age of 18 who were able to advocate for themselves, but they were still appointing the parent. We had several instances of that as well. So in an effort to resolve this issue, with my help, we had developed this supplemental questionnaire that we worked in collaboration with our governor's office at the time. Before I get to what that looks like, we scheduled a meeting with them to discuss these concerns, laid out the mandate as required by the DD Act to explain and express our concerns. And in order to alleviate these concerns, with each different administration that comes in, we meet with the legislative staff to go over each of these mandates, our mandate, excuse me, and the requirements, and ensure that applicants moving forward meet the criteria. We developed a questionnaire that once people apply through the governor's website, if they see that they're potential candidate that we agree to move forward with, they will provide them a supplemental questionnaire that we developed. And you'll see on the next slide, you can go to the next slide, sorry. That's just the introductory page. We developed this to include the questions and descriptions of what the role of a person with a developmental disability is, and an explanation of what a developmental disability is per the DD Act, so that when they're checking this box, they can clearly see, do I fit into these criteria? Does this apply to me? Next slide. Not sure what happened there. I'll keep talking as he's working on it. There is a second page to that also lists out the parent or guardian's question, immediate relatives, those who may have formerly resided in an institution, which is another required category, as well as groups concerned with developmental disability services, the local and non-governmental agencies that are required positions on the council. There we go. So with each of these items listed, it allows us to be able to better identify which category the person may fit in. So if potential applicants apply and they've already marked person with a disability or parent of a person with a disability, they complete this, and we see that they do not fulfill the needs, then we're able to let the governor's office know that they would not qualify. But then it helps move forward the applicants that do meet the requirements. Sorry, I know I'm stumbling over my words, but that's about all I have. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Stephanie. We appreciate you letting everybody know about the work that you did to kind of come up with a supplemental questionnaire, so your appointments can be a little more membership category appropriate. So we are going to move now to our panel. Lillian Deja is going to facilitate, and then Cordero Booker, Matt Caslin, and Lisa Newbern are all going to answer questions from her about their onboarding experience and talk a little bit about what's important in the onboarding experience for them. Lillian?
Hi, everyone. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. We really wanted to have this conversation so we could explore council member perspectives on onboarding and orientation. Specifically, we wanted to talk a little bit about how different councils' processes may be different, what was most helpful to council members, and share some ideas about possible improvements. So, as Amy mentioned, our panelists are Matt Caslin, Lisa Newbern, and Cordero Booker. And we're going to start with just discussing their onboarding and orientation process. And I'm going to call on Cordero first to tell us a little bit about his process.
Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Can y'all hear me well?
We can hear you, Cordero.
Okay, all right. Well, my onboarding experience. Sorry, I'm sliding. Sorry. Um, okay, okay. I got it now. Okay. My onboarding experience was, I would say, not like everybody else's experiences, but mine experience was very different. So, for me to explain more is, well, my onboarding experience was different. So when when I was appointed to the council, I had to go speak at the Capitol building in our town in Montgomery, Alabama, about Medicaid expansion. And once I spoke there, after it was done and over with, I was going to the director of the independent facility here in Alabama asked me, "Have you ever heard of the council? You need to get on the council." I said, "What is the council?" I was like, "I never heard of it." So after the Capitol building, we decided to go downtown to the director of the Alabama Council of Developmental Disabilities. And right then and there, I signed the application, still not knowing what it was, but I just seen disability. So I was like, okay, you know. And I signed the application and I met with the director and we did like a 5 minute interview asking me what I bring to the council. Have you heard of us? What we do? All that other stuff. And I was just being honest. I didn't, you know, and I filled out an application from there. After it was done, it took them, I would say, a couple of weeks from here from them. And once I heard from them, it was a letter through the mail saying the governor has appointed you to the Alabama Council of Developmental Disabilities. Still not knowing what it was, so I did my research a little bit. But yes, ma'am. So that was my onboarding experience.
Thanks so much, Cordero. So it sounds like you had
Yes,
a
ma'am.
little bit more of a personal experience where you got to personally meet with the executive director and talk a little bit more about the council. So now I want to
Yes,
bounce this
ma'am.
question back to Lisa Newbern and ask about what her onboarding and orientation process was like.
Well, I didn't really have an orientation process. The council was in a lot of change when I rejoined. And I say rejoined because years ago, when my son was very young, I served as a family mentor to the council. And And so I think there was just this expectation, oh, she's done this before, she'll know what to do now, and which was not necessarily the case. And so we have worked really hard to put a very specific orientation process in place for our members to really help them get started on the right foot. So if you're okay, I can give you just a little bit of information about what we do for everybody when they come on to the council. Is that okay? So,
That would be great.
okay, so we start everybody with a welcome email, and I filmed a video for that. So everybody gets to hear from me up at the very beginning of when they come onto the council. They get their appointment letter and they get our policy and our bylaws manual. And then we try to do follow-up welcome calls with everybody. We have got members coming on at different times. And so we just had a bunch of members come on last year. And so we were able to do that for everybody and get them all together. They were all together when they had their swearing in ceremony with the governor. And so that helps people get to know each other. But for people who don't get to participate in that for whatever reasons that it might be, then we're reaching out to them individually just to make sure that they understand what their roles are, what the council is doing, the priorities for us. And then we've tried to incorporate in our meetings fun games to help people also get to better understand what their roles are and what it is that our council is doing.
Thank you so much for that explanation. So
Sure.
it's like your council these days takes, also a more personal approach with your personal phone calls and welcoming to ensure understanding and that people do feel welcome. And also that team building component of utilizing games so everyone can get to know each other and kind of have a good time before jumping into that more serious council business. And so now I want to move to Matt. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your council's onboarding and orientation process?
Mine was a little bit more different than Cortero's and Lisa's. Ours is basically, I'm gonna basically go step by step. Well, first we start with our onboarding, and we actually get to have one of the meetings they get to see what we do, everything like that, and then we get to see like, hey, do you guys still want to be interested in this? Because this is a lot of work. And then we actually tell them, we say, hey, this is a really, really big step and everything because this is a huge commitment. So then if they say yes, yes, and then so they come back to the next meeting and we get them appointed and everything, and then all of a sudden our executive director Kristen Larson will come up and do what she brings like a whole ton of papers, and she brings up a PowerPoint that she makes for the new orientation and everything. We have an orientation that we use for a PowerPoint, and our executive director tells everything step by step. Everything that does from term limits to what do you call it? Like what our DD division looks like, what our DD network looks like, everything that you need in between. Like she does everything in between, like the little cracks. She fills in everything. And the one thing that I do want to say about this onboarding is she never leaves anything in the dust. She never does. Because she tells us everything because she wants to, and it's also kind of like Quintero's a little bit. Mine is a little bit more of a personal experience as well because I got to know Kristen pretty well. And I know she's on here. I know she's listening. So but it just there were so many personal things I've known with Kristen and everything. And when I first came on this Nebraska Council, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But when Kristen brought me into the orientation, I actually got to see what the whole entire thing looks like in a PowerPoint. Oh, I knew right then and there that this is where I need to be. And I'm also not just saying it just for I'm also not just saying this for Nebraska. We could also use this for other states too. Like I know, like for example, like Ebony with Louisiana and Stephanie with Delaware. I mean, we can use presentations also. I mean, we can also use like for your orientations and everything. I know Lisa was saying about that they don't have an orientation, but I mean, if you have like a PowerPoint and then use the games, I think that might actually help out because I think then we can kind of get the, if you know what I mean, Lillian, kind of.
Absolutely.
So it's there's a lot of things that they can use to get the orientation pretty much done. But for our Nebraska Council, when we because we have, I think it's 50-50. I think that's about right. I think 50% of it has, well, actually no. 30% of it has to be self-advocates, 20% has to be family, and then the rest is our DD network and state reps. So we have to have the self advocates piece. If you don't have the self advocates piece, I mean, you need then people need to start looking into that because those are your people that have disabilities that need to be on your councils because they are the people on the front lines.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I'm so glad that Nebraska is actually using self advocates because ever since self advocates came into our council, we've been way better, way better, way better because it's just it's a huge difference. If you learn from a self advocate, it's a lot more different because it's coming from a personal experience. And so I'm gonna end with this. I told this to Lillian Quintero on this. If you don't give self advocates a chance, how can we learn? But if we don't learn, how will we know? That's how I'll end this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Dean. I'm
Yes, Cordero.
Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you my orientation. I mean, the orientation experience. I told you to onboard, but I didn't give you my orientation experience. Like, I could just sum it up in like 1 minute.
That'd be great, Cordero. Thank you.
Okay, I sum it up in 1 minute. I promise.
Do you
So
mind
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
So
Before we jump into your orientation process, do you mind if I summarize a little bit about what I heard from Matt, and then we can hear about your
oh,
onboarding process? Is that okay?
yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So two things that stood out to me from what Matt shared about his orientation and onboarding process was how his executive director talked about, that step-by-step process and breaking down the council and making sure that Matt was informed throughout the entire process. And also the strength of having the self-advocates, on the council and hearing from that perspective. So that I think the explaining step by step also references back to what Amy was talking about earlier with making sure that council applications are extraordinarily transparent about that time commitment and that work commitment. So Cordero, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm sorry. I it was like when before we had met, it was like the first time again, like orientation. I'm like, oh, I forgot to say. But my orientation was kind of similar to Matt, but very different. Where we covered over a span of 5 meetings because at that time Zoom or anything like that, Zoom and online meeting was not in like wasn't even existing then, but before COVID. And so we had to meet face to face. So over the past of 5 meetings, we understood what the council was. They even break down the different committees that we're going to be on, what they're about and what they stand for, the nomination process, the voting process, and also breaking down the voting process as well, how new members are voted upon, the positions in the elections as well, because a lot of times you can run, but you may not understand how to run. And also, they even broke down of how to um, present an idea, that way you'll be able to presenting ideas that can help the council, but make sure it's not of your own. Even of your own, you can still they were able to and tell you how to present it to where it can be of the council and not of your own as well. And also they broke down the term limits and breaking down the the term limits of each council and how many years that it was. So yeah, broke that down. Everything similar to Matt, but just a different form.
Thank you for sharing that, Cordero. I like how you bring up the fact that you guys didn't have Zoom whenever you did your orientation process, because I think that kind of changes how we do our orientation and how we connect with each other. So maybe that's something for you guys to consider when you're looking at, building out your orientation process, is what format is going to work best for your council. I also appreciated how you mentioned term limits, because that's something that I think, whenever you're serving on the council or whenever you're staffing the council, that's information that we kind of take for granted sometimes, but is really important to communicate to our new members, because that may not always be super clear in the beginning. And also, I love how you brought up how they taught you how to present an idea to a council, because that's also a really specific skill that sometimes we'll take for granted, where, okay, maybe someone doesn't work within council world and maybe doesn't exactly know yet what that etiquette looks like. So I want to move on to our next question, and that is, what was most helpful during your orientation process? And so I'll go in the same order as last time. And Cordero, I'll ask you to answer the question first.
I would say talking to members that was rolling off. That was one. Also, talking to the staff as well, because a lot of times, you may not. A lot of times, you don't know, and you think every question is a wrong question a lot, and sometimes it's just asking. Sometimes the wrong question is the right question, and talking to former council members to really get me comfortable with the roles of the the membership really helped me, but also talking to different heads of our DD network that was on the council that make up the council to get really very familiar with them and what their roles were. How do the council um come into play? How did they became a part of the council? So having a better and different and heads of the organizations as well really helped me out into learning what it was. So I would say, but crucially, in self advocates as well. They really helped me along the way because a lot of the people a lot of the people I never met or even have any idea about their children that have disabilities and how they advocated for their children. So those were the things that really helped me out that made me very comfortable as well, but also being comfortable to actually have that conversation with them too. Yeah. So yes, ma'am.
I appreciated your answer a lot, Cordero, and I really related to your answer, because whenever I served on our council in Louisiana, one of the most helpful things for me too was being able to network with those older self advocates who had been on the council for longer, because we had that shared life experience, but they had the experience on the council that I didn't quite have yet. And so, what I'm hearing with a lot of these answers is that there's kind of this theme about connection, right? Some of the coolest parts about our onboarding, of our orientation processes, are that connection, whether that's through games, personal phone calls, or having those mentors from older council members help out the new members. And so, Lisa Newbern, I'd like to ask the same question to you. What was the most helpful during your orientation process?
So I am going to talk about what we do now. And I went to our newest members and I asked them to share answers to the questions that you had sent us. And so I am representing them today because they are our newest members and the ones who have recently been through our onboarding process. And I just checked the participants list and I see that Fanta Mitchell is on here. I can't really remember GCDD pre-Fanta because she has just been so fantastic. She is our membership coordinator, and it is just her priority, one, to run our office, but also to really focus on our members and their onboarding and keeping them engaged while they're members. And so I saw several of you had asked for information about the game, the Jeopardy game that we played. So if you want to put your emails in the chat, Fanta or I can get that information to you. But getting the feedback from the people that most recently went through our onboarding process that Fanta organized for us, and this echoes what you've said, is about the strong peer connections and then having accessible resources and opportunities for early engagement. So speaking to the opportunities for early engagement, we allow people to join committees right away. And so that provides them with work that they can immediately do, but also a smaller group setting to get to know people who are also on the council. This one really touched my heart to hear that the new members really felt that the staff have been very kind and helpful to them. And I think that that's really important. That's what you want your new members to find in the staff that are working on council, is that they are kind, that they are there for the members. And so I was glad to see that people shared that comment with me. A welcome call. People really enjoyed having an initial welcome call to explain the council structure, priorities, and what their role was going to be. Another thing that we're doing that people carry through on that is that before each council meeting, we have a pre-meeting for our new members so that they can attend that meeting to ask any questions that they have about the upcoming meeting, so that hopefully they can better participate once we're in the full council meeting. And then the learning by doing. And so that goes back to having them participate in a committee right away.
So much, Lisa. I love that you polled your new members. That is amazing, and you gave such great information. I think what's really interesting about some of the data that you pulled was the idea of having a pre-meeting for new members, because I tacted a leadership lab on engagement a couple of months ago, and one thing that was brought up about council member engagement from other councils that was a theme was these pre-meetings, that pre-meetings were really, really helpful for a lot of the members, not just during the onboarding process or orientation process, but also throughout the lifespan of their council membership. So there's a space where council members can come, ask those questions freely without necessarily having to be in such a hyper public forum, and where everyone can be a little bit more comfortable and ask those questions. So thank you for your answer. And last but not least, Matt, I want to ask you, what was most helpful about your orientation process?
Oh, geez, Lillian, I'm trying to remember what I said back then. um, Basically, mine was like kind of like what Quintero said. It's basically the staff that I had. Probably the best one will probably be Kristen, because I mean, I'm trying not to lose emotion here, but trying to keep myself intact here. Um, but I mean, Kristen and her staff, I mean, they have been working their butts off. I mean, trying to keep everything in line with not just the council, but Kristen and Nikki and Edith. I know I'm gonna run off the list, but those gals, I mean, seriously, they are just in meetings, out of meetings, into meetings, out of meetings. I mean, they're doing everything for us. And the thing is, they still make time for us. If we need something, call them. They always answer. Even though if they're not answering, they will call you back as soon as they're ready. And that's the one thing that I have learned over the last 5.5 years. It's it's been a lot of it is basically been working with Kristen and everything. I mean, she she is the reason why she is in DD, because she knows she wants to help all of us. And and this one thing that was successful is basically the presentation that she did for our orientation. Because if Well, I'm gonna also say this too. If I was an executive director, I would do exactly what Kristen would do. Basically, start with a presentation, but then to add on to it, I would do like halfway in between their terms, like halfway, maybe at the midway, ask them the same questions that they had at the beginning of their orientation, and then rate it and see what they think. And then if they want to reapply, they can redo it. So then they can redo the same questions, and then they can actually still see if they can get better feedback. Because I mean, there's all kinds of ways that they can do it, but I mean, that's one big thing I was kind of looking at after doing my onboarding. I think one time, I mean, is good, but if you do it a second time after they've been through it, I think that would really help out too, because then that can give you more data to work with. And I think that could be a huge, huge thing too. I mean, it could really help out the councils and everything. So, but for my answer, it would definitely be the staff, and also working with our D network and our state reps, because I know a lot of state reps that are good friends of mine. So I know the DD division that we have in Nebraska, Nebraska VR, that's the vocational rehab. Disability rights are USAID here in Nebraska, that's through the Mineral Miner Institute. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on and on. So, but our staff and everything is probably my best answer, because it's just having our staff around just working for us is the biggest thing. So, but yeah, that's a lot of information to go through, but it's just that's what my answer is. So,
Well, thank you, Matt. So one common theme that I notice about y'all's answers throughout this question is that staff support, that ability to contact staff with any questions throughout the orientation and onboarding process. And Matt, I really liked your idea about, redoing some orientation midway through the council members' term, because I think that's a really great idea to help reground council members, in those responsibilities, in those obligations, and also in what does it mean to be a council member? Because I think we can really get caught up in some of the nitty-gritty work of being a council member, that it's good to go back to basics sometimes. So Amy, do you think we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I think you have time for one more.
Perfect. So for time purposes, I think we may ask, what parts would you have changed about your onboarding process? Because I think that will keep us within our time window. So Cordero, I want to ask this question of you first.
I think I would say from my point of view is understanding what you're getting yourself into. Understanding the commitment that it's going to take. Be familiar with the organizations and stuff, you know. Also, I will also think like with um the one thing I would probably would ask though, I wish it was a history timeline on the website to where you actually know as a council, like when you got started, what were some of the events that the council was very instrumental in, so people can have an idea of how important your council is on history wise, from when you first got started the to now. um Also, I would say um that's probably it for me. Be very self-aware of what you're getting yourself into, the commitment, and understanding, doing your research on the organization, so you have a great understanding stuff. Like me walking in some blind, but then now couple of meetings, now you see now. So yes, man, that was me.
I love your idea of having a history timeline. So you kind of get that context of the council before you start the work. And I also think, I know that I think this was something that we had talked about in a pre-meeting, was a timeline of council work of like, okay, when do you start developing the 5-year plan? When do you start developing committees? When does membership come around? Like maybe a timeline of that. So new council members can kind of understand, okay, what do the next couple of months look like? Matt, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have an additional comment?
Yes, I was the one that brought it up. I was
Oh,
sorry. I
thank
was the one.
you.
I was the one that brought it up because I was. That's why I was waving my hand. I was like, "Hey, I brought it up." So, so yeah, but yeah, I'll let you guys finish. So,
Sorry about that, Matt. I feel like I've had so many meetings recently that it must have scrambled my brain. So thank you for the reminder.
you're welcome.
All right, now I want to ask Lisa, is there anything that you would have changed about your onboarding process?
Sure. So again, I polled our members, and this is what they shared with me. Mentors, and I know we've talked about that, but we actually haven't had mentors, but I think it's a fantastic idea. And their comments were that it builds the trust, it supports the understanding, and it gives the new members a safe space to ask questions. And so that did come up several times in the comments about they wanted somebody that they could go to versus asking some of their questions in front of the full council. So I think that that was really good feedback from them. Providing a guide that contains photos and bios of the council members and the state agency representatives so that everybody knows who everybody is and what it is that they do. Um, Explaining not just what the council does, but how it does it. So, in terms of the advocacy and in having the committees working with the partner agencies, the DD network. So, that was another one. And they specifically asked for visual overviews of roles and committees and an org chart. And the lived experiences of members so that they could see how what we're doing as we move along the path, that it actually makes changes for people and it puts it in that real world context of if we do this based on our history of doing that, here's what we're hoping that we'll be able to achieve. And this is a big one for me, acronyms, spelling out the acronyms, letting everybody know what those actually mean. And then also people who aren't familiar with state government or policy work or the legislative calendar, just updating everybody on that. And this was also an interesting one, just the way the timing worked out for us. We invited our new members to the council meeting before they had actually been sworn in. So technically, they were still members of the public, and just being clear with them about, are you allowed to contribute to the conversation, or do you have to just wait until the public comment portion of that particular meeting until you are sworn in? So that came up in the comments that I received. So huge shout out to the GCDD members who provided me with this information to share with all of you today. And then again to Fanta and Darcy, our amazing executive director. So
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for the GCDD members who helped out with the answers. Um, I,
absolutely.
I love the idea of the photos and the bios, especially for the folks who worked at state agencies. Because I remember whenever I joined our council, I was very young, and the people who intimidated me the most were the state agency representatives because I didn't understand what their organizations did. I didn't know what the acronyms were, and they seemed like these hyper professional people who were untouchable, right? So having a photo with the bio and some more information on their organization would have been really helpful for me to help personalize it a little bit more, familiarize myself a little bit more, and also be more confident in my interactions with them as a council member so we could work together as a team on those council decisions. So lastly, I want to ask Matt about if there's anything that he would have changed about his onboarding or orientation process.
Well, I'm gonna probably piggyback off of what we just said there, Lillian, about what's
Yeah.
Quintero. So, basically, it's about the timeline. I love the timeline that Quintero and we talked about in our pre-meeting that we had before this. I wish that Nebraska had like a little bit more of a timeline of where it started to now, and then also like kind of like what we had like a little diagram, if you know what I mean. Yeah, because that's what we talked about, and we said we can even have like from this point here we have like this is when it started. This is where you are now, and this is what it is in the future. Like so, we have past, present, future, and we can have, I know sometimes we don't know what the future of the councils are, but sometimes we do know. You never know. So, but then when you have those diagrams, there's a famous quote that Kristen always puts in our orientation. I know, us people in Nebraska, we actually hear this quote many times. It's from Dr. Mark Freeman. It's a token that we use for our council. I can't remember what the words actually are off the top of my head, but there's a quote that we use from Dr. Mark Friedman. He's a very close to us because he actually did some projects with the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities, and Kristen has adapted that into our council now, and I just love that. I love the token because we talk about it all the time around our council, and I wish I knew about it a little bit more because I love the quotes that Kristen puts in. I mean, if we have the quotes and like in our onboardings and everything, and we can have like quotes that we could use like to help other self advocates, I think that could be really huge too. Plus with the diagram and plus the timeline, what Quintero was saying, I think that could help a lot of self advocates and figure out what the timeline is. Because I know we talked about term limits. That could also be a part of the diagram too, because then you can also have a timeline of when does my term start? When is my term is midway? When's my term ending? Like you can have it all in that diagram. And then you can just say, oh, we could then here's about the acronyms that you're talking about, Lillian. I think I might be talking with Kristen and our NCDD staff about making our little booklet, like a little binder of like papers and everything that we use for like what we use at an actual council meeting. I know we already do that, but we can put like in a little binder, send it to like the newer council members, and then they can see what they're doing and everything. I mean, like before they even get, I mean, I know we do that already, but kind of specific a little bit. I mean, what the acronyms and everything, they can kind of tell. Like some people say, I've actually seen this actually with my own eyes and saying, what's that acronym? And I'm like, and then I just tell them right away. They're like, "Oh, makes sense." So I'm like, if we could tell what the at least tell the self advocates what the acronyms are, and then we can actually pronounce it like in a full way, I think that would really help self advocates and everything. That would be like, because I know Lily, you've had some of those too, and that's why I was like, I, I just kind of piggybacking off of that too, because I mean, there's a lot of good ways that we could do. But I mean, there's so many of them, but there's not very much time to talk about them all. So,
Absolutely.
so,
And
so, go ahead.
thank you, Matt. We really appreciate your perspective on what parts you would have changed about your council member onboarding process, and also all your good thoughts about, good graphics and timelines and visuals during, onboarding and orientation, because I think that's something we underestimate is that's our visual learners, right? Something really helpful that Michelle Matney put in the chat was that they have sample annual calendars for council work that probably mimics those timelines that we were talking about and referring to earlier. So that's the entirety of our questions for this panel. And I just want to thank our panelists for taking the time to chat with us today and share their experiences. And thank you to everyone who attended the session to listen in.
Thank you so much, Lillian, and all of our panel members. We're so appreciative of the information that you have given because, we can have these conversations with our own council members, but sometimes it's great to hear other perspectives too about what would be helpful in an onboarding process. So thank you so much for bringing that information to everyone.